Hey, this is Hans from Request for Music. I want to try a new video because the other one had a lot of volume problems on the microphone. I want to try and do something on the fly. I'll just start something and it's going to be using the delay, but I'm also going to use some other modules. I'm starting off with the DAW, which is an RFM module, which is actually intended to be sort of a FM module in the style of the DX7. That means that if I put two of them in and I'll connect the first one to both outputs, I get just a sine wave, and the DAW in itself is a module where you have bars for all of the harmonics that are in there. So it's actually set at one harmonic. I could even take this one out for the moment. And this one has one harmonic, which is the sine wave that you hear. And if I dial in multiple harmonics, as you can see, you get a list of them. And actually, if it goes over them, you can go to the end or go step by step through all of the harmonics that are available. And you have sliders that set the level of such harmonics. So if I do something like this, I'm sort of dialing in the tone as I would do when I was working with an organ, for instance. So I can go to the end here and dial higher notes in. Something like this. And if I just dial this back, it switches off all of those harmonics. If I go in, they're still there, but I can do stuff like that then. So that's the simple way of using it, but there's a lot of inputs and stuff in there, as you can see. So that means that if I would take another DAW in there and I actually take the output and I go into my frequency modulation input, I'm actually doing the same kind of thing as the algorithms in a DX7 do. So I'm taking the output of this and modulating this, and if I dial up my frequency modulation, or sorry, my pulse, wrong again, phase modulation, I'm actually changing the way the sound is reacting and responding. So that's a way of really changing the sound. And inside of the DAW there's actually an envelope, so if I switch this off and I switch that off, they both don't give any sound until they get a gate. And obviously I need to get the gate from some output somewhere. So I could take the gate from this, put that into the gate. I could take the pitch and put that in, and I could do the same for the other one, to at least get melodic sound, because otherwise you're actually sort of modulating with something that is not, because if I take this off, so if I now press any key, the modulation is there, so it's still phase modulating the sound. But since this one has no pitch, it's going to modulate in a different way than if I would take this in, because then I obviously get the pitch. It is modulated, it phase modulates the other one. And if I then take the gate of this one into the gate of the first DAW, so to speak, I could still use the envelope in here. So now this decides how much it is going to drive the other one. So let's switch this up a bit. Would be nice to hear it. Oh, I didn't put it into the gate. I didn't give it a gate, sorry. And the combination of envelope on this part and the depth of phase modulation decides what kind of sound you get. And since it is sort of a frequency modulation or sort of a DX7 kind of thing, you have the number of harmonics, you have a ratio. So that means that if I change the ratio here, it also drives the other oscillator in a different way. So let's give this a longer decay and a longer release. And the level of the first one, the modulator, this is actually carrier. When you try to keep the analogy of a DX7, this is the carrier, this is the modulator. So the amount of volume that you put in there is deciding how much modulation you're giving. And when you combine that with other harmonics in there, you obviously change the sound of this output module. So that's basically what it is. There's a lot of other things. There's a demo of obviously online on the in the Cherry shop. So try it for a couple of days, and who knows, maybe you'll be surprised and maybe you'll be interested. So first of all, let's have a look at the delay, because that was obviously what I intended to do. So I'm going to take the delay, and instead of going straight into the output, I'm going to take the output from the delay instead, and putting the output of this DAW into the delay. The delay has the standard setting at the moment, which means that it's at 100 milliseconds for both channels, and it has a mix of about 50%. And so we can change that obviously, and so if we lower that a bit, then we get a different sound, and obviously the amount of mix on either side will affect the way the thing sounds. That would be obvious, I guess. So I do something like this, and I could actually change this by putting the values up. In the low setting, this has a setting from 0 milliseconds up to 150 milliseconds. If I change it to medium or mid-range, it's going from 100 up to 1500 milliseconds, and if I go up to high, it gets from 1000 up to 5000 milliseconds. So that will be quite a long time before you get the delay. As you can tell, you get it back right now. And since there's no feedback in now, you only hear it once. After 5 seconds, yeah, there it is. So I'll dial back a bit because this is pretty long. Normally for sort of a lush delay, I use something like 500 or 600 on one channel. Get the mix at about 25 or 30% or something like that, and use some feedback, because then I get this. And since you're working with two delays, maybe it's even better to first of all get the feedback out again and switch it back to sort of standard behavior, and let's put some values in there. Let's say that I do 200 milliseconds on this channel, and for this I do something like 250, because you can obviously change to some sort of syncopathic kind of, or 150. Okay, so also good. Something like this. So now this is delaying in a different way than this one, and especially when you do something like that, and especially when you play multiple notes, you obviously get a kind of rhythm only because of the way that sounds. So that's why I normally use sequencers to be able to listen to what it does. So I'll take the sequencer that I like, which is the ENCORE from Sharp Modular. So I'll have to look that up. Where is it? Sharp Modular. The ENCORE. I'll put that in front here. Come on. There it is. And I'm going to change notes a bit. So this is at C4, and this is, I'm going to put that at C4 as well. Going to put this to C5. Where is it? C5, C4 again, C5 again. So I'm going to create some kind of a bass line kind of thing. C5 again, and a C4 again. Right, I'm going to take the pitch into both, I guess. Pitch into those, and I'm going to take the gate, and I'm going to take the gate into both of those dials as well. So connect this up, and one of the notes is a bit sharp, so it seems. So let's have a look. Which one was that? This was C5. That's C sharp 4. Okay, so indeed. Well, let's put it up a bit. Take the feedback out. First of all, the normal sound. Which is this? Dial the level back a bit. And obviously I can do a lot by either changing the transpose of everything here, because this has a transpose of 12, and change the sound by dialing back the envelope for this, so it drives the carrier a bit differently, or change the depth of this pulse phase modulation, maybe change some of the harmonics in there. So okay, so at least we have something. And now dial up this, and you have probably seen feedback. You know what feedback does. That's going to feedback a lot. And apart from that, I've got crossfeed, which is sort of taking the other channel and driving the output of that into the input of the first channel. So that's what you can do a lot of stuff with, because if you dial both of them up, it's sort of, I'll switch this off and I'll take the feedback up a bit. Then you'll hear what happens. If I dial this up enough, oh, this had a mix off. It will actually start, a really feedback loop, because the output of the one channel, when I mix it into the other and I'm cross-feeding it, it will go back again, and so on. So let's just change the speed of both of them. It's still oscillating, as you can see, because this one is not giving any output by itself. So this is now only what is coming out of the delay and the feedback and the crossfeed. And the point is that there's a lot of inputs here on the side, and I can actually use an LFO to change the speed of the delay time, for instance. So, well, it's still doing its thing at the moment. So let's take this RFM 1 LFO, which is a single LFO with very narrow size, and I can just take this sine wave, for instance, and put this in here, and now it's driving with a low tempo. It's driving the range of this, and the depth of this level decides how far it's going to go through the whole range of 0 up to 5,000 milliseconds, and it's doing that around this center speed, so to speak. So this center value of 766 is what it's going to go around. My level is pretty high, or actually the level is very hot from the LFO, so it's going into the delay and it's giving far too much of a range. So if I take this back, so I change it to a really low value, something like this, you will hear that it's not going to go that deep anymore. And actually I'm by now I was almost rid of the sound. That obviously had to do with the amount of cross, the amount of feedback, and so if I take that up again, it's starting in this oscillating kind of thing again. And this low modulation thing that I do now is a lot more interesting if I change this back to really low values, something like 3 for instance. If the mix is higher, you will hear that you get sort of a phasing or flanging kind of effect. There's still some other sounds in there in the buffer, it will get rid of that later on, but as you can hear, there's a lot of things that you can experiment with that way. And obviously this decides the speed with that phasing, flanging sound or whatever is working. So let's change this one to a low value as well. Still what you're hearing is mostly delay actually. It's just what was left of the couple of notes that I sent in there, because this in itself is not giving any sound now. As soon as I start play, it's driving the delay, and then depending on outputs and all of that kind of stuff, it's going to feedback. So if I take the feedback up even a bit more high, I have to be careful, of course. It can go out of control, as you can tell. So then I obviously need to take the cross and that kind of stuff a bit back. So let's change this a bit. Let's go back to a bit more normal settings. So I'll take the delay modulation out of this for now, go back into some kind of range somewhere and put in some of this, take the cross feed out, give it feedback enough to give that lush delay that I wanted. So I have something a bit more normal. So something like that. Well, then if I was driving this DAW or this DAW with this DAW, this carrier which is being modulated by the other one here, and obviously it might help if you give such a module a label. So this is the carrier, as I said, and this is my modulator. So I go in, give it a label, and if you know how a DX7 works, you know that there's all kinds of algorithms that you can make. So actually you could do that in the same way. If you take a couple of carriers and you take a couple of modulators, you can make the same kind of sounds that you could do with a DX7. So anyway, if I use this and I'll take this back, I'll take it back to just the first harmonic. So I'm just driving a sine wave with whatever in here at the moment. So do something like this. And actually, as I said, this is driving the other one, and this decides how that is being driven. Now, when I created this module, I didn't put any input in there to change the number of harmonics, really. So what can we do for that if we wanted that? Well, another developer, Rware, Chris Neuberger, he created module called Control, and I think it's even free, and you'd really have to look into his modules. He creates really nice stuff. He did this hardware control, which means that I can, if I have the if I press the learn key, I get all of the buttons that are available. I see those, so I can actually take this as an input for this module, which means that I can drive that from here now. So that means that if I take my LFO, and I'll put that on this side, and now I drive this value here from my LFO module. Would be nice if it did it. It's going to drive the range of this harmonics by using my LFO. So even when there's specific controls not available in a module, I can still use this module to be able to change that, as you can see, because now this is modulated by that. And the LFO, I've got my by settings on, but if I go to just positive settings, it will have an easier effect on everything, because then it's going from the lowest value, and otherwise it would become be getting below 0. And obviously the range that I give it here is going to decide how deep it's going to be modulation wise. And I still have all of the values here. And obviously I could take the same kind of outputs from this, from my LFO actually, to drive the delay time. So now the LFO is driving this, but it's also driving the delay time of my second delay. Use the cross feed. So a pretty easy way of creating some kind of ambient, strange sci-fi effect. And even if I would take, for instance, my triangle output, take another output, and drive the mix of this one, then the depth of one of those delays is being taken care of by the LFO level. So indeed there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could do and that you could experiment with things like that. So yeah, another way, another approach, still sequencer creating sounds that drive my synth source, which in this case is the DAW with the carrier and the modulator, carrier and the modulator going in, or the modulated sound of the carrier going into the delay with some speed, which is changed in delay time for my second delay by the LFO, and the LFO itself also controls the control from hardware that is changing the number of harmonics that are being used as a modulator for the carrier. If you still understand how it's fitting together. I hope that sort of gives you an idea again of the strange or silly things that you can do with stuff like this in the modular world of synthesizers. And I hope you like that. And let's end with some echoing sounds here. So I hope you like that, and see you next time. Cheers. Bye bye.